I'm in my ECS console. So if you go to the task definition, you can find the task I created in previous lessons. So what I'm going to do now is to select this task and go to action and then click run task. So that's how you run a task on the cluster. So when you click run task, you can define what cluster that you want to run this task. In this case, I have only one cluster. If you have multiple clusters, it will show which cluster you want to run it. I want to run only one task. You can run one or two if you like. So I want to run only one task. We are going to run one task, so the task group really doesn't matter in this case. Task placement is where you define the algorithm that is used to place this task. So for example, you can define bin packing or AC balance spread. So in this case, we are running only one task. So you can keep something like AC balance spread. It really doesn't matter. Click run task. So it will go there and then schedule this task on the cluster. So right now the last state is pending, but the desired state is running. So it will take some time for this container to go there and then start on the cluster. It has to download the image and then start the container. So keep it for some time, and if you refresh it, the last state will turn into running state. So while this task is running, what I'm going to do now is to remote login into the EC2 instance that this cluster has created. In production environment, you don't define a key pair, so you cannot remote login. But in this environment, I can, because I define a secret key pair. So select the EC2 instance. By default, this EC2 instance security group does not allow RDP access. So you need to allow RDP connections. So select the security group and make sure that it allows RDP access. So you can go there and then add a section for the inbound rules and then allow RDP access, let's say from the internet. So select RDP. So of course in production environment you don't do that, but this is a lab environment. The idea is to showcase you what happens behind the scene when you schedule a task on ECS. So I allowed RDP access into my EC2 instance that is behind the cluster that provides CPU and memory to the cluster. So what I'm going to do now is to log in into this remote login into this EC2 instance, so then I can explore what is happening when I schedule task. So browse for the secret key that you created, decrypt the password, get the password, and you can of course then easily go and then get the remote desktop connection. Type your password, username is administrator, and then you can remote login. So I got my desktop environment. So this is the EC2 instance that is working behind the cluster. Like before, let's do a bit of screen cleanup so that we get a clean slate to work on. So if you type Docker images, what ECS did was it executed some commands behind the scene to download that image from the repository we have created. So it got the image it wanted. If you type docker ps, you can find any running containers. So of course I gave enough time for before I recorded this lab. So it started this container. So this container is of course running my app, my batch app, exe. And you can go type docker inspect, give the container ID, and then explore some attributes that ECS has defined when it created this container. You can find some labels, some mounted folders, what command it's running, some tags, or identify which cluster it is coming from. So if you type docker ps -all, so this is the container that it's scheduled. I can of course, so this is a running container ID. I can execute any other docker command on top of these running containers. So if you start the ECS console, you can find that there's a one running task. So if you go into the task, you can find that the last state is running and it's in desired state. You can of course execute normal Docker commands like docker stop being in the cluster, but because this is a lab environment, I'm going to do some testing how this works. So right now this container is running and it's in good condition. Let's go into my EC2 host or the cluster instance and then try to stop this instance. So I'm going to type docker stop and give the container ID, and let's observe what happens when I stop this container. Let's say something bad happened, this machine crashed, and if it crashed or if it stopped, if you refresh it, you can find that there's no any task running in this moment, because the task that I ran, I stopped it simulating some kind of a crash. So let me start another task. Like before, you can just select to run one task and click run task. Because the image already exists in the host, this time the task should start quickly. So if you go to docker ps, so as of it doesn't have, so give it some time to start. Oh, I didn't click the run task. You need to click the run task to start the task. So refresh it. So right now it's in last status is in pending state. So if you keep refreshing, it should come into run state. And if you type docker ps being in the EC2 instance that is back in the cluster, you can find that it started the task. If you refresh it, you can find that the task is in running state. So this is what happens. So ECS is in fact executing some Docker commands using the agent installed on that EC2 instance to schedule Docker containers. Of course, I can stop this task from here. You can select it and then click stop. So in this way, you can stop the task from EC2 ECS console itself. So now the task is stopped, and as of now, there's no any running task. So if you type, for example, docker ps, you will find that there's no any running containers because I stopped the container from ECS console. I'm in my ECS console. I have stopped all the running tasks in my cluster. So as of now, I only have one EC2 instance that provides resources to this cluster. So when you run multiple tasks on this cluster, they will all get scheduled on this one EC2 instance. But there may be some situation where you will have a cluster with multiple EC2 instances back in this. So how can you find which place these tasks are running? So let me start a new task. So in this case, I'm running the version 11. In your case, it may be different version. So let me select the task that I want to run. In this case, the version 11 of my batch app task. And I want to run only one task, and you can select any placement algorithm and then click run. So right now it's in pending state, so keep refreshing. At some moment in time it will become the last state will become running state. So now right now the application is running. If I want to check which EC2 instance it gets scheduled, if you click that task, you will find that it gives you the task information, and there one property you have is that EC2 instance ID. If you select that, it will take you to the EC2 instance that the task got scheduled. So if you have multiple EC2 instances behind this cluster, you can easily identify which EC2 instance this task got scheduled. So if you go into the cluster, right now I have one EC2 instance back in there, and there's only one task running. So let me go into task definition and explore some other properties of this task. So if you expand this, you will find that it has certain properties we define when we create this task definition. So one of that one is this CloudWatch log group. So you can click this one and then explore the logs created as a result of the containers running of this task. You can either directly go into the CloudWatch and then select the log group, or you can click from the task information and then select the log group. Here you can find that it has output some log information with the prefix my batch app, which we gave. And this is the console output of my application. So if your container stop, the logs are still available on CloudWatch, Central CloudWatch. So all the logs you can aggregate in one location. So that's actually a good practice. So right now I have only one task, and that's why you have one log stream. So let me go into my cluster and then start another task. So let's say we are going to start another one task, and then click run task, and it will start another task. So keep refreshing. At some point in time that task will start. So it's in running state now. So if you go into your CloudWatch, you will find that it created another stream with the prefix that we gave. And so in this way you can easily find which task created which log entries. So this is like before, this is the console output of that batch application we are running on this cluster. To revise where this log group came from, if you go into the task definition and then create a new revision, if you go to the container definition, remember when we created the task definition, we created a log group. So in here you can find that I specify what's the log group to use and what's the prefix, and this is how the logs were created. So I'm back in my cluster. You can find there's a 2 tasks running, and there's only one EC2 instance back in this cluster. What will happen if you try to run some additional task? So as of now, if you explore ECS instances, you will realize that this cluster doesn't have enough resources to run an additional task. So as of now, it uses all the CPU available. So if you try to run an additional task when you don't have enough resources, let's see what will happen. So let's try to run another task. Let's run one additional task. Click run, and it will give you an error saying that it doesn't have CPU. In following section, we are going to learn how you can scale this cluster manually and how to scale it automatically depending on the number of tasks you want to run on this cluster.